Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight, settle in somewhere comfortable, dim the lights if you can, maybe grab something warm to drink. Before we begin, if you enjoy these late-night deep dives into history's darkest corners, take a second to subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing our little community scattered across time zones, all drawn to the same shadows. Tonight we're going to talk about something they don't teach you in school, something that's been locked in, laid and buried under Westminster Abbey for over 400 years. We're going to talk about what really happened to Elizabeth I, not the fairy tale, not the Golden Age propaganda, but what they found when they finally undressed her corpse, and why, to this day, the British establishment refuses to let anyone examine what's left of the Virgin Queen. Because here's what they don't want you to know. The body in that tomb tells a story that would burn down everything the monarchy built its legend on. By the time you finish listening tonight, you'll understand why some secrets have to stay buried, why some lies are more valuable than truth, and why a woman's body, even in death, can be the most dangerous weapon in a kingdom's arsenal. So let's start where it gets dark. March 24th, 1603. Richmond Palace. A woman is dying, but she's been dying for weeks now, and she refuses to lie down. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. The room smells like death and lavender. The servants have been burning it for days, trying to mask something underneath. Something rotten. Something that won't go away no matter how much incense they pile onto the coals, no matter how many windows they crack open to let in the freezing March air. Elizabeth Tudor is 69 years old. She's been Queen of England for 44 years. She stared down the Spanish Armada and won. She turned a bankrupt island into an empire. She's survived assassination plots, religious wars, and every single person who ever tried to control her. Every person who ever thought a woman couldn't rule alone. And right now, she's sitting on a pile of cushions on the floor, propped against the wall, refusing to get into her bed. Her ladies in waiting are exhausted, absolutely shattered. They've been taking shifts for 2 weeks now, holding her upright, watching her fade like a candle burning down to nothing. One of them will later write in a private letter, quickly destroyed but fragments survive, that Her Majesty has not lain flat in 17 days. 17 days of sitting, leaning, being held, but never ever lying down. Why won't she lie down? Catherine Howard, her chief lady in waiting, tries one more time. Her voice is gentle but desperate. Your Majesty, please, you must rest properly. You must allow us to... Elizabeth's head turns, slowly, like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Her eyes, once sharp enough to cut through a man's lies at 50 paces, are clouded, now unfocused, seeing things that aren't there. But when she speaks, that command is still there, buried under the confusion, that voice that once rallied an army at Tilbury. The bed is a trap, she says. Each word costs her. Death waits there. And then she laughs, a high, strange sound that makes the servants exchange glances. The kind of laugh that raises the hair on the back of your neck because it's not quite sane, not quite connected to anything happening in the room. Here's what they're not saying out loud. What they barely dare think. The Queen has gone mad. She talks to people who aren't there, people dead for decades. She argues with her father, who's been in his grave for 56 years. Last night she screamed about men in black coming through the walls, clawing their way through the stone itself. Yesterday, she spent an hour convinced she was 6 years old again, calling for her mother in a child's voice, that broken, desperate sound that made all the ladies weep, even as they pretended not to hear. The mother Henry VIII beheaded when Elizabeth was barely 3. But here's the thing they're also not saying, the thing that's even more terrifying. Maybe she's not mad. Maybe after 70 years of performing, 70 years of wearing masks, both literal and figurative, something in her mind finally just broke under the weight. Or maybe she knows something they don't. Maybe lying down really is surrender, and Elizabeth Tudor has never surrendered to anything in her entire life. Not to her father's rage, not to her sister's executioner, not to Philip of Spain's armada, not to time itself. So she sits and she waits, and her ladies hold her up and wonder how much longer this can possibly go on. Because Elizabeth Tudor is not going into that bed. And when they finally do get her there, when she finally collapses and can't fight anymore, what they find underneath all those layers of silk and jewels and elaborate lies is going to haunt everyone who sees it. It's going to trigger a cover-up that lasts 4 centuries. It's going to become the secret that Westminster Abbey guards more carefully than the crown jewels themselves. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand why Elizabeth's death became a cover-up, to understand what they're still hiding in that tomb, we need to go back, way back, to before she was a queen, before she was even safe, before she learned that survival meant becoming someone else entirely. We need to go back to 1536. To a little girl, not even 3 years old yet, standing in a stone corridor in the palace complex, listening. The crowd outside is roaring, thousands of voices rising and falling like waves, and then suddenly, abruptly, they go silent. Completely silent. And then nothing, just the sound of her own breathing and the rustling of her red velvet dress. That's when it started. The day they killed her mother. The day Elizabeth Tudor learned the most important lesson of her life. The lesson that would shape everything she became. Being a woman can get you killed. May 19th, 1536, the Tower of London. The morning is grey, drizzling that fine London rain that soaks through everything. They don't let Elizabeth see her mother's execution. Of course they don't. She's 2 years and 8 months old, just a baby really. But she hears it. Oh, she hears everything. The palace has thin walls and sound carries, especially when thousands of people are gathered in one place, especially when they're there to watch a queen die. The crowd packs into the tower grounds, like it's market day, jostling for position, some people paying for better views. Anne Boleyn walks out onto the scaffold, wearing a grey damask gown, trimmed with fur. Her hair is already loose, falling around her shoulders, ready for the sword. She's always been good with words, always been able to talk her way through anything. And she makes a speech now, protesting her innocence while being so careful not to directly accuse the king. Even now, about to die, she's playing politics, protecting Elizabeth. Because if she says the wrong thing, if she names names or curses Henry, her daughter might be next on this same scaffold. The French executioner is an expert, brought over specially because he's the best. They say he can do it in one stroke, clean and quick, barely any pain at all. It's almost a mercy compared to the English method of hacking away with an axe until the job is done. One stroke, clean, quick. Anne Boleyn's head rolls across the scaffold and the crowd roars its approval, like they're at a bear baiting, like this is entertainment, like a woman's death is something to cheer about. And somewhere in the palace, a little girl in a red velvet dress is being told that her mother has gone away, that she won't be coming back, that she's been very wicked, though they won't explain how, and Elizabeth must be a good girl now and never, ever speak her mother's name. Not ever. Not if she wants to live. Elizabeth is 2 years and 8 months old. She doesn't fully understand what's happened. But she understands enough. She understands the fear in her servants' faces. She understands that everything has changed. She understands that her mother is gone and isn't coming back, and somehow this is connected to her father, the huge bearded man who sometimes picked her up and sometimes didn't, who smelled like wine and rotting flesh from the ulcer on his leg. Within days, she's declared a bastard. That word she's too young to understand, but will learn to hate. Her title is stripped away, like tearing off a piece of clothing. She's no longer Princess Elizabeth, heir to the throne. She's just the Lady Elizabeth now. Her household is dismantled, broken apart like someone smashing a toy. Her servants are dismissed, sent away to other positions. She's moved to a small manor house with minimal staff and even less money. Dressed in gowns too small for her because there's no one to order new ones. No one. Who cares enough to notice? And that's where she stays, watching, learning, absorbing lessons that most children never have to learn. That safety is an illusion, that love can turn to murder, that being female and royal is the most dangerous combination in the world. Here's what people don't understand about Henry VIII's court. It wasn't just dangerous. It wasn't just politically unstable. It was a slaughterhouse wearing velvet and gold brocade. It was a place where people smiled at you in the morning and had you arrested by afternoon, where you could go to bed a queen and wake up with your head in a basket. And Elizabeth watches it all happen, over and over. A parade of stepmothers, each one teaching her something new about survival. In the next 11 years, she watches her father marry 4 more times, and she pays attention to what happens to each wife. This is her education, more valuable than any book. This is how she learns to stay alive. Jane Seymour becomes wife number 3. Quiet, demure, everything Anne Boleyn wasn't. And she dies giving birth to a son, the one thing Anne couldn't do, the thing that got Anne killed. Jane wins in death what she might never have won in life, Henry's genuine grief. He actually mourns her. Elizabeth is 4 years old when Jane dies, and she watches the funeral, watches her father weep, and she learns, even if you give the king what he wants, even if you succeed where others failed, it might kill you anyway. Being a woman in this world is lethal no matter what you do. Anne of Cleves arrives next, wife number 4. She's smart, smarter than people give her credit for. When Henry decides he doesn't want her anymore, calls her ugly, though she's perfectly fine looking, Anne doesn't fight, she doesn't argue, she doesn't demand her rights or appeal to the Pope or make a fuss. She just accepts it, accepts the annulment, accepts her new role as the king's beloved sister, accepts the generous settlement and her own estates and her freedom. And most importantly, she accepts her life. She gets to keep living. Elizabeth is 7 years old enough to understand now, and she learns, adapt or die. Submit when you must. Surviving is more important than winning. Catherine Howard comes next, wife number 5. She's 19 years old, pretty and flirty and so stupid. Or maybe just naive, maybe just too young to understand the game she's playing. She gets caught having affairs, or maybe she doesn't. Maybe the evidence is fabricated, but in Henry's court, accusation is conviction. There's no trial that matters. She's beheaded at the Tower, same scaffold as Anne Boleyn, the same cold stones soaked in the same family blood. Elizabeth is 8 years old, and she learns, youth and beauty won't save you. In fact, they might condemn you. Being desirable makes you a target. Catherine Parr finally arrives, wife number 6. She's brilliant, careful, strategic. She survives Henry by being essentially invisible, by never threatening him, never contradicting him, by nursing him through his final rotting years, when the smell of his infected leg is so bad that servants burn incense constantly and still gag. She outlives him by being so careful, so controlled, that he forgets she's dangerous at all. Elizabeth is 10 years old by the time Henry marries Catherine, and this one she actually gets close to. Catherine is kind to her, arranges for her education, treats her like a daughter, and Elizabeth learns, strategic invisibility is survival. Don't stand out, don't make waves, don't remind them you exist until you're ready to make your move. But here's what else Elizabeth is learning during these years, while she's being shuffled from manor to manor, while she's watching women die or disappear. Books are safer than people. Knowledge can't betray you. While other girls her age are learning needlework and music and how to manage a household, skills meant to make them good wives, Elizabeth is learning Latin and Greek and French and Italian and Spanish. By the time she's 11, she's translating religious texts for fun. By 13, she's debating theology with scholars twice her age. By 15, she's fluent in 6 languages and has read more philosophy than most university students will ever encounter. Why? Because words don't betray you the way people do. Books don't change their minds. Knowledge can't be taken away the way titles can, the way your mother's head can, the way everything else in her life has been stripped from her without warning. Every language she masters, every book she reads, every hour spent studying is one more layer of protection against a world that's trying to kill her. Its armour made of ideas instead of steel. Her tutor, Roger Ascham, will later write that Elizabeth had a mind that was more than masculine, sharp and quick beyond measure. It's meant as a compliment, the highest praise he can think of. What he doesn't understand is that she's not showing off. She's not trying to impress anyone. She's building herself into something that can't be dismissed or destroyed. Something too valuable to kill. And then finally, her father dies. January 28th, 1547. Henry VIII succumbs to the infected leg ulcer that's been poisoning him for years, that's been leaking pus and rotting flesh for so long that his entire body has become septic. He's been literally rotting alive for a decade. The smell's so overpowering that servants burn lavender and rosemary and sage constantly and still have to hold their breath when they enter his chambers. When he dies, his body has swollen so grotesquely that they apparently have to scoop him into his coffin because his corpse has burst through his clothes. The king who terrorised England for 38 years ends as a bloated, stinking corpse that no one wants to touch. Elizabeth is 13 years old. She survived him. Against all odds, she's still alive. Her 9-year-old half-brother becomes Edward VI controlled by a council of Protestant fanatics who immediately start executing Catholics with the same enthusiasm Henry showed executing Protestants. The fires at Smithfield light up again, different people burning now, but the same screams echoing off the same stones. This is where Elizabeth's real education begins, because Edward's reign is chaos, 6 years of religious violence and political instability. The country is tearing itself apart over doctrine, over whether communion is symbolic or literal, over whether saints' statues should be smashed or preserved, over questions that seem insane to kill people, but they're killing people anyway. If you backed the wrong side, you burned. Literally burned. Tied to a stake, surrounded by wood, screaming as your flesh roasted and melted, and the smoke choked you slowly, because burning to death isn't quick. It's agonizing. It can take 20 minutes or more, if the fire doesn't catch right. Elizabeth keeps her mouth shut, goes to Protestant services because that's what Edward wants, reads her Bible, says her prayers, gives them nothing to accuse her with. She's learned that survival means becoming whoever they need you to be. But here's what's happening to her body during these years, and this is where the mystery starts, where the questions begin that no one will ever answer. She's 13, 14, 15, the age when girls become women, when their bodies change and prepare for motherhood. Puberty should be hitting her hard, but something's off. Something isn't quite right. Her ladies in waiting start noticing. They don't talk about it openly, of course, but they whisper to each other in corners. Elizabeth doesn't have monthly cycles like other girls, or if she does, they're irregular, strange, not quite normal, not what they expect. There are quiet conversations that stop abruptly when she enters a room, knowing glances exchanged when they think she isn't looking, and foreign ambassadors, whose job is to watch everything and report back to their kings, start sending strange observations home. They note her height, unusually tall for a woman, nearly 6 feet, which is giant for the 1500s when the average woman is barely over 5 feet. They comment on her voice, surprisingly deep, almost masculine, not the high feminine tone they expect. They describe her build, strong, athletic, broad-shouldered, nothing like the soft curves considered beautiful in women. She moves like a man, they write. She stands like a soldier. One ambassador writes back to his king, "The Lady Elizabeth has the bearing of a soldier rather than a maiden. There is something uncommon in her form." Another notes, carefully, diplomatically, in language meant to hint at things he can't quite say. "Her form is not as other women's. I cannot elaborate in writing, but His Majesty would find her most unusual should he meet her in person." What are they seeing? What's different about Elizabeth's body that makes these experienced diplomats, men, who've assessed dozens of potential brides for their kings, write such odd reports? We'll come back to that, because in 1553, when Elizabeth is 19 years old, everything goes to hell. Edward dies, he's 15, probably tuberculosis, though some historians think it might have been arsenic poisoning, his ambitious counsellors trying to control the succession. Either way, he's dead, coughing up blood and pieces of his lungs, begging for death by the end because the pain is unbearable. And Elizabeth's older half-sister takes the throne, Mary Tudor. Bloody Mary, they'll call her later, and she'll earn that name. Devout Catholic, determined to drag England back to Rome, to undo everything Henry and Edward did, to restore the old faith no matter how many people she has to burn to do it. And Mary has not forgotten that Elizabeth is the daughter of the woman who replaced her mother, the bastard child of the whore who stole her father. Mary looks at Elizabeth and sees Anne Boleyn's eyes staring back at her, and she hates what she sees. The first thing Mary does when she takes power? Round up Protestants and start burning them. The fires at Smithfield rage constantly. Men, women, even children if they won't recant. The smell of burning flesh becomes normal in London, just part of the air. The second thing she does? Throw Elizabeth in the Tower of London. Same building where her mother died. Same cold stones, same damp walls, same shadows that remember executions. Elizabeth is 20 years old, and she thinks she's going to die. They bring her by barge in March of 1554 down the Thames through Traitor's Gate. That water entrance that every prisoner knows means you're probably not leaving alive. It's pouring rain, that cold London rain that soaks through everything, and Elizabeth is sick. Genuinely, seriously sick. Fever and swelling in her abdomen that her doctors can't explain, or won't explain. She's been ill on and off for months, strange symptoms that come and go, pain that makes her double over, bleeding that isn't normal, though no one will talk about it directly. She refuses to get out of the boat at first, just sits there in the rain, water soaking through her gown, running down her face, mixing with what might be tears but might just be rain. Because once she steps through that gate, she might never leave. Her mother didn't. The water laps against the barge, dark and oily, and the guards wait, and Elizabeth sits, and for a long moment, no one moves. "I am no traitor," she finally says, loud enough for everyone to hear, for all the guards and boatmen and witnesses. "I am the king's true daughter. I am no traitor." Doesn't matter. The guards don't care about her protests. In she goes, through the gate where so many prisoners have entered and so few have left alive. Her cell is in the bell tower. Not the worst accommodations in the tower. She's still royalty after all, or sort of. Still the king's daughter, even if she is a bastard. But it's a cell. Nonetheless, stone walls that weep with damp. One window that lets in weak watery light. Guards outside her door at all times, watching, listening, reporting everything she says or does. And she waits. Days stretch into weeks, weeks into months. 2 months of not knowing. 2 months of wondering if today is the day they come for her. If this morning's breakfast is her last. If that sound of footsteps in the corridor means they're coming to take her to the scaffold. The charges are thin. Almost laughably thin. Some letters found among Protestant rebels mention her name. Some servants maybe heard something, or maybe they're lying to save themselves. It's impossible to tell. But in Mary's England, thin evidence is enough if the Queen wants blood. And Mary wants blood. Mary wants to erase everything her father did. Every reminder of Anne Boleyn, every Protestant who threatens her vision of a Catholic England restored. They interrogate Elizabeth over and over, the same questions asked 20 different ways. Did you know about the rebellion? Did you support it? Are you plotting against your sister? Who are you working with? What are you hiding? No. No, no. She knows nothing, she says. She's loyal, she insists. She loves her sister, she claims. She would never betray the crown. Elizabeth is brilliant at this, absolutely masterful. Every answer is perfectly calibrated, balanced on a knife's edge, respectful but firm. She never admits guilt, but she never accuses anyone of lying either, because that would imply they're wrong, and you can't tell the Queen's interrogators they're wrong. That's treason in itself. She plays weak when it serves her, claiming she's too sick to be questioned harshly, clutching her stomach and grimacing with pain until they have to stop. She plays loyal, desperate to prove her devotion to her sister, writing letters that express such heartfelt love and duty that they're almost satirical, though no one dares laugh. It's a performance, every word calculated, every tear timed perfectly, every gesture meant to convey innocence, while giving them nothing they can use against her. And it works, barely, by a thread so thin you could cut it with a harsh word. Mary wants her dead. The evidence is clear on that. Mary's closest advisors push hard for execution, argue that Elizabeth is too dangerous to leave alive, that as long as she lives, she's a rallying point for Protestant rebels. But there's a problem, a serious political problem. Elizabeth has become surprisingly popular with the people. Mary is burning Protestants by the dozens, sometimes by the hundreds, and England is starting to turn against her. The fires at Smithfield are too much, too constant, too brutal. People are whispering that the Queen has gone mad with religious zeal. And Elizabeth, the Protestant princess locked in the Tower, is becoming a symbol of resistance. Executing her might trigger an uprising, a real one, not the pathetic amateur rebellions they've been crushing, a genuine popular revolt that could tear the country apart, so they keep her in the Tower. 2 months of limbo, of not knowing, of hearing other prisoners being taken out to die, their footsteps echoing down the corridor, and wondering if next time it'll be her turn. And here's what that does to a person. Here's what living with that level of fear and stress does to a body. One of her ladies will later testify in secret, decades after Elizabeth's death, when it's finally safe to speak, that Elizabeth's monthly bleeding, which had always been irregular and strange, stopped completely during her time in the Tower. Just stopped. No bleeding at all for months, and afterward, for years, it never came regularly again. Sometimes months would pass with nothing. Sometimes it would come with agonizing pain and bleeding so heavy she'd be bedridden. Nothing normal, nothing like what other women experienced. Stress can do that to a body, shut down reproductive functions when survival is threatened. It's a known medical phenomenon. Your body decides that this is not a good time to get pregnant. This is a time to just stay alive, and it shuts everything down. But what if it was more than stress? What if whatever made Elizabeth's body different was being exacerbated by the trauma? What if the fear and the uncertainty triggered something, revealed something that had always been there but hidden? We're speculating now, walking into territory where history becomes mystery. But stay with me, because the evidence is scattered but persistent. The pieces are there if you know how to look. May of 1554 finally brings release, or a version of it. They move Elizabeth out of the Tower to house arrest at Woodstock, then later to Hatfield. Still a prisoner, still watched constantly, but not in immediate danger of execution. The threat has passed for now. Mary, meanwhile, is making disastrous decisions that will define her reign and earn her that bloody nickname. She marries Philip II of Spain, and England hates it. Nobody wants a Spanish king. Nobody wants their country to become a province of Spain's massive empire. There are protests, grumbling, but Mary doesn't care. She wants Philip. She wants children. She wants Catholic heirs to secure the succession. And this is where it gets interesting, where Mary's tragedy becomes Elizabeth's salvation. Mary announces she's pregnant. The whole country celebrates. If Mary has a child, a Catholic heir, then Elizabeth becomes irrelevant. No threat at all. Just another noble lady who can live out her days in obscurity. Months pass. Mary's belly swells. She goes into confinement, preparing to give birth, following all the traditional rituals. Weeks pass, more weeks. She's waiting for labour to start, waiting for the child to come. Nothing happens. Eventually, humiliatingly, Mary has to emerge from confinement and admit there's no baby. There never was. It was a phantom pregnancy, her body creating symptoms of pregnancy because she wanted it so desperately, because she needed it so badly. Her belly swelled with fluid, not a child. Her breasts produced milk for a baby that didn't exist. Imagine the humiliation. Imagine standing in front of your entire court and admitting you were wrong about being pregnant, that your body lied to you, that there's no heir after all. 2 years later, she does it again, announces another pregnancy, goes into confinement, waits, nothing. The second time, when she finally accepts that she's not, and never was pregnant, Mary is 43 years old and dying. Probably uterine or ovarian cancer, the same symptoms she mistook for pregnancy. The bleeding, the pain, the swelling, all signs of tumours growing inside her, killing her slowly. And everyone in England starts looking at Elizabeth, the heir, the next queen, the Protestant hope, the future. November 17th, 1558, Mary dies, probably grateful to finally escape the pain. The crown passes to Elizabeth as smoothly as anything ever happened in Tudor England. Elizabeth is at Hatfield when they bring her the news. She's sitting under an oak tree, reading a book in Greek, because of course she is. That's so perfectly Elizabeth, reading Greek philosophy while waiting to hear if her sister has died and made her queen. The councillors arrive on horseback, muddy from hard riding, and they kneel in the grass, and they proclaim her Elizabeth by the grace of God, Queen of England and Ireland. According to legend, Elizabeth quotes Psalm 118 in Latin, "Ad domino factum est illud, et est mirabile in oculis nostris." This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvellous in our eyes. It's a great story. Very dramatic, very queenly. In reality, she probably just tried not to pass out from shock and relief and terror, because she's alive. Against every possible odd, every betrayal, every plot, every attempt to destroy her, she's alive. She survived her father's rage. She survived her brother's illness. She survived her sister's executioners. And now, she's the most powerful person in England. She's 25 years old. The crown should feel like victory, like everything she's worked toward, everything she's survived has led to this moment of triumph. Instead, it feels like a trap closing around her, because now comes the pressure, now comes the demands, now comes the part that will define her entire reign and slowly, inexorably kill her. Now comes the marriage question. Within weeks of Elizabeth's coronation, before she's even properly settled into being queen, the proposals begin, and they're not subtle. They're not polite suggestions she can consider at her leisure. They're demands, ultimatums disguised as advice. Her Privy Council, all men of course, presents her with a unified front at her first official meeting with them. They've clearly coordinated this, planned exactly what to say and how to say it. Her Majesty must marry, they tell her. She must produce an heir. The succession must be secured. A woman cannot rule alone, they explain, as if she's too simple to understand politics. She needs a husband to guide her, to handle the difficult decisions, to provide stability and strength. It's not a request, it's not advice. It's an ultimatum dressed in velvet courtesy. Parliament weighs in next, sending a formal petition. The Queen cannot rule alone, they write. A woman needs a husband to complete her, to fulfill her natural role, to give her children and purpose and legitimacy. It's all wrapped in respectful language, but the message is clear. You're not really a queen until you're someone's wife. Foreign ambassadors circle like sharks who've smelled blood in the water. Every eligible bachelor in Europe suddenly wants to marry the Queen of England. Not because they love her, not because they've ever met her, but because England is a prize. Whoever marries Elizabeth controls England. Whoever gets her pregnant controls the succession. Whoever shares her bed shares her power. Let's talk about the suitors, because the parade is both ridiculous and revealing. And it goes on for decades, this endless stream of men who think they can possess her. Philip II of Spain comes first, which is grotesque when you think about it. Yes, Mary's widower, the man who was married to Elizabeth's sister, he's offering to marry her now, to move seamlessly from one Tudor sister to the next, like they're interchangeable pieces on a chessboard. Never mind that it's theologically questionable, that the church has rules about marrying your wife's sister. Never mind that it's personally revolting. Philip doesn't care. He's twice Elizabeth's age, fanatically Catholic, controlling of the largest empire in the world, and he wants England as another province in his collection. Elizabeth meets with his ambassador. She's brilliant at this. Smiles sweetly, the perfect gracious queen. Says she's deeply honoured by His Majesty's proposal. Says she will consider it with the utmost seriousness that such a generous offer deserves. She has absolutely zero intention of marrying him. Zero. The thought probably makes her want to vomit. But saying no directly would insult Spain. And Spain has the largest military in Europe. Spain could invade. Spain could turn England into a battlefield. So she strings him along. For years, sends encouraging letters full of diplomatic nothingness, accepts gifts, expensive jewels, and elaborate tokens of affection. Writes back thanking him for his patience and devotion. Always says she's still considering, still praying for guidance, still consulting with her counsellors. The negotiations drag on for 3 years before Philip finally gives up and marries someone else. And then he spends the next 30 years trying to invade England anyway, so Elizabeth's instinct was right. Marriage to Philip would have meant England absorbed into the Spanish Empire, English soldiers dying in Spanish wars, English gold paying for Spanish ambitions. Next comes Archduke Charles of Austria. He's Protestant, which is definitely better. He's young and apparently handsome if the portraits can be trusted, though portraits always lie. But marrying him would tie England to the Holy Roman Empire's endless continental wars. England would become a side piece in European politics, dragged into conflicts that have nothing to do with English interests, bleeding English money, and men for Habsburg ambitions. Elizabeth expresses interest. She's good at seeming interested. Negotiations drag on. She requests portraits, studies them carefully, comments on his appearance in ways that are positive but vague. She asks detailed questions about his health, his temperament, his religious beliefs, his plans for England should they marry. She's so thorough, so careful, so seemingly serious that everyone thinks this might actually happen. Never commits. Years pass, more portraits arrive, more letters are exchanged, and somehow, mysteriously, the negotiations never quite conclude. Charles eventually gives up and marries someone else, someone who will actually give him an answer. Erik III of Sweden bombards her with portraits, each one more flattering than the last, more heroic, more godlike. His portrait painters are apparently competing to see who can make him look most impressive. He adds more hair in each one, more muscles, a more chiseled jaw until the portraits bear almost no resemblance to the actual man. Elizabeth hangs them in her private chambers and laughs about them with her ladies. "Look," she says, pointing at the latest arrival. "He's given himself a full head of hair now, and the shoulders of Hercules. By next year's portrait, he'll be 10 feet tall." She never considers him seriously. He's too far away, too unstable. Erik is actually going insane, will eventually be deposed and imprisoned by his own brothers, will die in captivity, possibly murdered with arsenic in his pea soup. Elizabeth somehow senses the instability, the danger, and keeps him at arm's length. Francis, Duke of Anjou, arrives next, and this one gets surprisingly far. Elizabeth is in her 40s by this point, he's in his 20s. The age gap is scandalous, but she actually seems interested, or does a brilliant job pretending to be. She calls him her frog in letters, supposedly an endearment, though it doesn't sound particularly romantic. They exchange gifts, write letters that border on flirtatious, negotiate seriously for years. Elizabeth even meets him in person, which is rare. Most marriage negotiations happen entirely through ambassadors, sight unseen until the wedding day. But Anjou comes to England, visits her court, and they spend weeks together. He's short and ugly, and pockmarked from smallpox, but apparently charming. Elizabeth seems genuinely fond of him, or genuinely fond of something, whether it's him or the attention or the political advantages of a French alliance is impossible to say. They get close, really close. There are rumours she'll actually do it, marry this time. But he's Catholic, firmly, devoutly Catholic. And England will riot if she marries a Catholic. The country spent Mary's entire reign burning under Catholic rule. Elizabeth's popularity, her entire political position, rests on being the Protestant queen. Marrying a Catholic would shatter that, would turn her supporters against her, would potentially trigger the kind of uprising that could destroy her. The negotiations eventually collapse. Both sides blame the other. Anjou returns to France, dies a few years later, probably from tuberculosis. Elizabeth keeps his portrait on her bedside table for years afterward. Was it love? Probably not. But maybe affection. Maybe regret for the path not taken. And then there's Robert Dudley. This one's different. This one actually matters. This one is real. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. They've known each other since childhood, grew up in the same circles at court. He'd been at her coronation, literally leading her horse through the streets of London in the parade, positioned where everyone could see him close to her. Favoured. He's tall and handsome and ambitious and charming. Protestant, which is essential. Intelligent enough to keep up with her, brave enough to challenge her when necessary. Perfect in almost every way. Except for one small problem. He's married. His wife, Amy Robsart, lives in the country at Cumnor Place, while Robert spends all his time at court, constantly with Elizabeth. They ride together every morning, they hunt together, they dance together at every banquet. They're inseparable in a way that makes everyone whisper, makes ambassadors send scandalised reports back to their kings, makes the court buzz with speculation. Is she sleeping with him? Probably not. Elizabeth is too paranoid about pregnancy, too aware that one bastard child would destroy everything, one illegitimate baby, and she becomes her mother. The fallen woman, the whore, the cautionary tale. She can't risk it, won't risk it. But emotionally, absolutely. This is the closest Elizabeth ever comes to romantic love. She lights up when he enters a room. She laughs at his jokes. She touches his arm when they talk. Casual intimacy that she allows no one else. She gives him gifts, expensive presents that raise eyebrows, that make people mutter about favouritism and impropriety. And Robert loves her back, or loves her power, or loves the possibility of becoming king consort. Maybe all three. It's impossible to separate his genuine feelings from his ambition. But he wants her. That much is clear. And then, in September of 1560, Amy Robsart dies, falls down the stairs at Cumnor Place and breaks her neck. Just falls. Trips on her skirts maybe, or misses a step, or who knows. The servants find her at the bottom of the stairs, dead, her neck broken. Suspicious? Oh, incredibly suspicious, impossibly suspicious. The timing is too perfect, too convenient. Dudley's wife dies just when he needs her gone, just when Elizabeth might be willing to marry him if he were free. The rumours explode immediately, spreading through Europe like wildfire. Dudley murdered her, everyone says, hired someone to push her, to make it look like an accident. Or Elizabeth herself ordered it, people whisper. The Queen had her lover's wife murdered so she could marry him herself. The scandal is massive, international. Every ambassador in Europe is writing shocked, gleeful letters home about the murderous Queen of England and her ambitious lover. Some historians think Amy was actually ill, possibly dying of breast cancer, and that her bones were brittle from the disease, making the fall genuinely accidental. Some think she jumped, committing suicide because she was in pain or depressed or knew she was dying anyway. Some think she was pushed. We'll never know. The investigation at the time was inconclusive, carefully inconclusive, finding that it was an accident, but in a way that satisfied no one. And here's the thing, the tragedy of it. Elizabeth wants to marry him. She's in love, probably the only time in her life she genuinely loves someone romantically. Wants someone not for political advantage, but just because she wants him. And she could do it. She's queen. She could marry whoever she wants, scandal be damned. She could weather the storm, could wait for the rumours to die down, could force her counsellors to accept it, but they threaten to revolt. Her advisors, the men she depends on to run the country, make it clear they'll resign en masse if she marries Dudley under this cloud of suspicion. The scandal would destroy her, they tell her. Foreign powers would use it as proof that England is ruled by a murderous whore. The legitimacy of her reign would crumble. Catholic Europe would see it as justification for invasion, for removing her from power, for installing a proper Catholic monarch who doesn't have blood on her hands. So she doesn't marry him, but she doesn't send him away either. She keeps him close, makes him Earl of Leicester, gives him estates and titles and more power than any unmarried woman should give to any man. Flirts with him in public, lets everyone think they might be lovers, which drives the ambassadors crazy trying to figure out what's actually happening. Are they sleeping together? Are they secretly married? Is he really her lover or just her favourite? The speculation never ends. Were they sleeping together? The evidence suggests probably not. Elizabeth was too paranoid about pregnancy, too aware that one mistake could destroy everything. But emotionally, she was as close to Dudley as she ever was to anyone. He's the one person she trusts, the one person who can argue with her without fear of immediate execution, the one person she wants to see every day. And here's the interesting part, the tantalising clue. Years later, when Dudley is dying, weakened by fever and stomach illness, that's probably cancer, he writes her a final letter. It's found among her private papers after her death, tied with a ribbon, marked in her own handwriting with 3 words, his last letter. In it he mentions the truth we alone know, the secret that bound us in sorrow rather than in joy. What truth? What secret? The letter doesn't say. Dudley's too careful or too weak to write it explicitly, and Elizabeth keeps it but never explains. But combined with everything else, with the refusal to marry anyone, the lack of children, the mysterious illnesses, the strange reports from ambassadors about her unusual body, a picture starts to form. A theory emerges that's impossible to prove, but increasingly difficult to dismiss. What if Elizabeth couldn't have children? What if something was physically wrong with her reproductive system? Something that made pregnancy impossible? What if the Virgin Queen wasn't making a choice at all, but hiding a medical reality that would have destroyed her legitimacy, that would have given her enemies exactly the ammunition they needed to remove her? Let's talk about the evidence, because it's scattered across decades and buried in diplomatic code and medical euphemism, but it's there if you know how to look. It's there in the things people don't quite say, in the observations they make and then walk back, in the patterns that emerge when you put all the pieces together. Foreign ambassadors in Elizabeth's court were essentially spies. That was their job. Kings needed intelligence, needed to know everything about potential marriage partners, potential allies, potential threats. So ambassadors watched everything. They noted what people wore, how they moved, how they spoke. They assessed health, temperament, appearance, everything. And they sent detailed reports home, some of them shockingly explicit, describing people's bodies in ways that would be considered invasive today. And the reports about Elizabeth are odd, consistently odd across multiple ambassadors from multiple countries over many years. Multiple diplomats note her manly voice, not just deep for a woman, but actually masculine in tone and timbre. They comment on it repeatedly, this striking feature that doesn't match her appearance. They describe her Unusual height and strength for a woman. Elizabeth was nearly 6 feet tall, which is tall now. But in the 1500s, when the average woman was barely over 5 feet, she was literally giant. She towered over most men. And she was strong, athletic, rode horses for hours, hunted with stamina that exhausted younger courtiers. They mention her masculine manner of speaking, not just her voice, but the way she expressed herself. Blunt, direct, forceful. She argued like a man, they wrote. She commanded like a king, rather than asking like a queen. One Spanish envoy, Diego Guzman de Silva, writes to Philip II in 1565 that Her Majesty's form is not as other women's. He's being diplomatic, using coded language, but he's saying something significant. He's saying Elizabeth's body is different. Unusual, not normal for a woman. And then he's suddenly recalled to Spain before he can elaborate, before he can explain what he meant, which is convenient and suspicious. The Venetian ambassador, Giovanni Michel, reports in 1557 that Elizabeth has more the bearing of a soldier than a lady, with great presence and commanding height. He describes her as having a very loud voice and masculine manner of speaking. Another diplomat writes that she has the stride of a man and voice to match. He sounds confused, like he's trying to describe something he doesn't quite understand, something that doesn't fit his expectations of how queens should be. These aren't insults. They're not trying to mock her. They're genuinely confused observations. Elizabeth doesn't quite fit the expected template for a woman of her era, and they're trying to report that fact without being explicit about whatever they're noticing. Then there are the medical incidents, the times when doctors actually got to examine her, rare occasions when she was too ill to refuse, and what they found troubled them deeply. In 1566, Elizabeth falls seriously ill. She's 33 years old. High fever that spikes and falls unpredictably. Sweat so severe she soaks through her bedding. Pain in her abdomen so severe she can't stand upright. Has to curl into a ball clutching her stomach. She thinks she's dying. Genuinely believes this is the end. And she nearly names Robert Dudley as Lord Protector to rule until a new monarch can be chosen, which shows how delirious she is because that would have triggered immediate civil war. Her doctors are finally allowed to examine her properly. This almost never happens. Touching the Queen's body is essentially forbidden without explicit permission. It's considered so intimate, so inappropriate. But she's dying, or they think she is, so they're given access. What they find is never officially recorded. No medical report survives. No diagnosis is written down. The official records just say she recovered after a few weeks of illness. But one physician, Dr. Huyck, her personal doctor, who'd attended her for years, emerges from her chambers looking, according to a courtier's diary, pale and troubled, as if he had seen something that shook him to his core. He refuses to discuss what he saw, won't tell his medical colleagues what he discovered during the examination. When pressed, he becomes angry, defensive, insists that the Queen's privacy must be protected, and he'll say nothing. Nothing at all. A year later, he's dead. Sudden fever. Dies within days. The official cause is listed simply as fever. No details given. Very sudden. Very convenient. In 1568, another incident. Elizabeth is 35. She collapses during a Privy Council meeting. Just faints suddenly in the middle of discussing policy. Her counsellors carry her to her chambers, summon her ladies. When the ladies get her to her bed and start loosening her clothing, start undoing the layers to help her breathe, one of them faints, just faints, hits the floor. The others immediately clear the room, sending away servants, closing the door. No explanation is ever given for what they saw, what made that lady faint. No official record mentions it. But it happened. Multiple sources confirm it happened. What did they see when they undressed her? What was beneath the layers that shocked them so badly one woman fainted? Some modern medical historians, looking at all this evidence collectively, have suggested a theory. Elizabeth may have had androgen insensitivity syndrome. Stay with me. This is important. This might explain everything. AIS is a genetic condition where someone has XY chromosomes, genetically male, but their body doesn't respond to testosterone. Their cells can't process male hormones. So they develop as female externally because testosterone can't do its job, can't masculinize the body. They appear completely female on the outside. Most people with AIS are raised as girls and never know they're different until puberty doesn't happen normally, or until they try to get pregnant and can't. Internally, people with AIS have undescended testes instead of ovaries and a uterus. They have a vagina, but it's often shallow, ending in a blind pouch. No cervix, no uterus, no ovaries. No way to menstruate. No way to get pregnant. People with complete AIS are often taller than average for women because they have male chromosomes directing growth. They have deeper voices because of their genetic makeup, though not as deep as typical men because they're not responding to testosterone. They have very little body hair, especially facial and pubic hair, because hair growth is triggered by androgens they can't process. Their skin is often remarkably smooth and fine because androgens cause pores to enlarge and produce oil. They're completely female in appearance but can't have children. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like Elizabeth? She was unusually tall, nearly 6 feet, giant for her era. She had a notably deep voice. Multiple sources, multiple countries, years of reports, all mentioning this striking feature. She apparently had very little body hair. This is mentioned obliquely in reports about her appearance. She never seemed to need to remove facial hair, which was unusual because most women of the era dealt with that, plucked their hairlines and faces regularly. Elizabeth apparently didn't need to. Her skin, underneath the makeup before the lead destroyed it, was reportedly unusually smooth and fine. Courtiers commented on it. That perfect smoothness that needed no powders or preparations to look flawless. And she apparently didn't have regular monthly cycles. Multiple sources hint at this, always carefully, always obliquely. Foreign ambassadors trying to assess her fertility would ask her ladies about her health, about whether she was regular, and would get vague, evasive answers that suggested something wasn't normal. Could Elizabeth I have been intersex? Could the Virgin Queen have been genetically XY? It would explain everything. Every mystery, every question. The refusal to marry. She couldn't risk a wedding night revealing her secret. Any husband would immediately discover she wasn't anatomically typical. The scandal would destroy her. She'd be seen as monstrous, demonic, not fit to rule, probably executed. The lack of children. She was infertile, physically incapable of pregnancy. All the pressure to produce an heir was literally impossible for her to fulfill. The mysterious illnesses, hormonal imbalances causing chronic pain, swelling, unexplained fevers. People with AIS can have various health issues related to their condition. The secrecy? A condition like this would have been seen as utterly horrifying in the 1500s. Evidence that she wasn't a real woman, that she was unnatural, cursed, some kind of monster. It would have given her enemies exactly what they needed to remove her. She's not even a woman. How can she be queen? Other historians have suggested different conditions. Swyer syndrome, another intersex variation. Various hormonal disorders. Conditions that could cause similar symptoms, similar physical characteristics. But we'll never know for certain. We'll never have proof. Because the one piece of evidence that could tell us, that could answer the question definitively, her skeleton, with its DNA intact, remains sealed in Westminster Abbey, and the British establishment has refused every single request to examine it. For 4 centuries, consistently, absolutely. No. In 1952, during preparations for Elizabeth II's coronation, there was a movement among historians to finally examine Elizabeth II's remains using modern forensic techniques. They petitioned the Crown, the Church, anyone who might grant permission. Request denied, out of respect for the dead. In 1975, when new non-invasive scanning technology became available that could see through lead coffins without disturbing the remains, they asked again. Ground-penetrating radar, X-rays, all completely non-invasive. They weren't asking to open the tomb or disturb anything, just to scan it. Denied. The Queen's rest must not be disturbed. In 2003, on the 400th anniversary of Elizabeth's death, a major petition from multiple universities, dozens of historians, medical researchers, forensic experts, they made formal requests, wrote papers explaining the historical importance, the scientific value. Denied. It would set a dangerous precedent. And here's what's interesting. They've allowed examination of other royal remains. Richard III was found under a parking lot in Leicester in 2012. His remains were exhumed, studied extensively, CT scanned in extraordinary detail, DNA tested, examined by dozens of scientists. The results were published, became international news. Major historical discoveries about his scoliosis, his diet, his death wounds. If you can exhume and study Richard III, why not? Elizabeth, Henry VII's tomb was opened in 1810, his remains examined. Catherine of Aragon's remains have been investigated. Edward IV's supposed children, the princes in the Tower, were examined though inconclusively. Medieval monarchs going back centuries have been studied. Why not Elizabeth? What makes her different? The official reason is always respect for the dead. But they're not respecting other dead monarchs. They're examining them, scanning them, DNA testing them. What's different about Elizabeth? The answer seems obvious. Whatever's in that coffin doesn't match the legend, and the legend is too valuable to risk. Too important to British identity, to ideas about female monarchy, to the entire mythology of the Tudor Golden Age. Because the story we tell about Elizabeth, the story that's been repeated for 400 years, is specific and powerful. The Virgin Queen, who chose duty over desire, who sacrificed marriage and children for her country, who ruled alone and magnificently, who was pure and powerful and perfect. That story props up centuries of British monarchy. It justifies female rulers. It creates a template for what a queen should be. What if the truth is messier? What if she wasn't a virgin by choice? What if her body made the choice for her? What if the entire reign was built on hiding a medical condition? Those are dangerous questions. Questions that would require rewriting textbooks and re-examining everything we think we know. So the tomb stays sealed, the body stays buried, and the legend lives on. But let's move forward, because whether or not Elizabeth could have children, whether or not she was intersex, she spent 45 years telling England she chose not to marry. And that choice, real or forced, came with a terrible price. A price paid in lead and whalebone and slow, agonizing physical destruction. Let's talk about the poison she wore on her face every single day. Elizabeth's iconic look is instantly recognizable, even today, 400 years later. That ghostly white skin, those red lips, that red gold hair. It's been immortalized in hundreds of portraits, each one showing the same flawless porcelain face, the same ageless perfection. What they don't show is how she achieved it, or what it cost, or how, by the end, her face was rotting off her skull while she still lived. The white makeup was called Venetian cerus. It was fashionable across European courts. Every noble woman wanted that pale, perfect complexion that showed you were wealthy enough not to work outdoors, refined enough to care about beauty. The recipe was simple. White lead mixed with vinegar, sometimes with arsenic added to make it stick better, to keep it from sliding off your face in warm weather. You read that right. Lead and arsenic, applied to the face every single day for 45 years. Think about that. Think about spreading poison on your skin, working it into your pores, layering it on thick enough to create that perfect white mask. For 45 years, never stopping, never questioning whether maybe this wasn't good for you. The process was elaborate, time-consuming, painful, First, you wash your face with a mixture that's supposed to prepare the skin, usually something acidic, vinegar or lemon juice, that actually damages your skin's natural barrier, strips away protective oils, creates micro tears in the surface. Then you apply the ceruse, not a thin layer. Multiple thick layers, building it up, working it in with your fingers or a cloth, spreading it carefully, evenly, making sure there are no streaks or thin spots. You need it thick enough to completely cover your natural skin tone, thick enough to hide any blemishes or imperfections or signs of aging. You need it thick enough to create a mask, a porcelain shell that looks flawless in candlelight. And then you wait for it to dry. It hardens on your face, cracking slightly when you move or speak. You have to be careful how you move, have to control your expressions, because too much movement will crack the makeup and ruin the effect. The result, in candlelight especially, is striking, almost inhuman. Elizabeth must have looked otherworldly, like a living statue, a goddess made flesh, that white skin glowing in the dim light, those red lips and red hair creating stark contrast. Beautiful in a strange, unsettling way. Not quite human, more like a mask or a painting. But lead is a neurotoxin. It doesn't just sit on your skin looking pretty, it absorbs. Through those micro tears the acidic wash created, through your pores, into your bloodstream, accumulating in your bones, infiltrating your organs, crossing into your brain. The symptoms of chronic lead poisoning read like a catalogue of Elizabeth's documented health problems. Severe, recurring headaches. She suffered from them her entire adult life. Headaches so bad she'd have to cancel public appearances, close the curtains, lie in darkness with cold compresses on her forehead, while her ladies sat quietly nearby. Headaches that made her vomit, that made life unbearable, that lasted for days. Abdominal pain, constantly. Her ladies reported that she often couldn't eat because of stomach cramps. Sharp pains that doubled her over. She'd go days barely eating, living on broth and wine because solid food hurt too much. The pain would come in waves, sudden attacks that left her gasping. Joint pain and muscle weakness. By her 40s, Elizabeth had trouble with stairs. Her knees hurt, her hips ached. By her 50s, she needed assistance standing after sitting for long periods. Her legs would give out unexpectedly. Her hands shook. Her fingers cramped around her pen when she tried to write. Mood swings and irritability. Elizabeth was famous for her temper, legendary for her rages. She'd be charming one moment, absolutely delightful, laughing and joking, and then something would set her off, and she'd be screaming. She threw a slipper at one minister's head during a council meeting. She slapped a lady-in-waiting across the face for a minor mistake, the crack of her hand against the woman's cheek echoing through the chamber. Her rages were terrifying, unpredictable. No one knew what might trigger them. Memory problems and confusion. In her later years, courtiers noted that Elizabeth would sometimes lose track of conversations mid-sentence, forget things that had just been discussed, ask the same question multiple times, start telling a story, and then trail off, forgetting where she was going. It wasn't constant, but it happened often enough to worry people. Insomnia, she barely slept, would pace her chambers at night, walking back and forth for hours, unable to rest. Her ladies took shifts staying awake with her, keeping her company through the dark hours when the demons came out, and the fear overwhelmed her. Anemia. Historical accounts describe her as often pale despite the makeup, weak, needing to sit during events where she'd normally stand. She'd get dizzy, need to hold onto furniture or a servant's arm to keep her balance. All of these are consistent with chronic lead poisoning. Every single symptom. The medical evidence is clear. For 45 years, Elizabeth was slowly poisoning herself, methodically, daily, and she couldn't stop. She absolutely could not stop because every time she appeared in public, she had to look ageless, eternal, divine, the Virgin Queen, unchanging, perfect. The mask wasn't vanity. It wasn't about being beautiful. It was political survival. Any sign of weakness, any crack in the facade, any hint that she was aging or sick or human, and the wolves would circle. Spain was always waiting for an excuse to invade. Catholic assassins were always plotting, always looking for the perfect moment. Her own nobles were always calculating whether they could do better with a different monarch. Someone younger, someone male, someone with clear heirs. Elizabeth's power rested entirely on her image of invincibility. The second she looked weak, the second anyone saw her as vulnerable, they'd move against her. Plots would multiply, rebellions would spark, foreign powers would sense opportunity. So every morning, without fail, her ladies applied the poison. Layer after layer after layer, until her face was a white shield, an impenetrable mask. Until the lead had soaked so deep into her skin that even when she washed it off at night, white residue remained in every pore, permanently staining her. And beneath the makeup, the damage accumulated, year after year after year, slowly destroying her face from the inside out. By her 40s, her skin was dry and flaking. The lead was breaking down her skin's natural moisture barrier, killing the cells that normally kept skin supple. Her ladies had to apply oils constantly, trying to combat the dryness, but it only got worse. The makeup itself was the problem, but stopping wasn't an option. They applied thicker layers to cover the damage, which made the damage worse, which required even thicker layers, a vicious cycle. By her 50s, she had open sores, small ones at first, little spots where the skin had broken down completely. Her ladies would dab them with ointments, cover them with extra makeup, but the sores got bigger. The lead was literally corroding her skin, eating through flesh. Necrosis setting in while she still lived. The sores would weep. Yellow fluid that smelled wrong, smelled like infection and rot. Her ladies would clean them gently, apply more makeup, pray the infections wouldn't spread. By her 60s, according to one lady's secret testimony, given years after Elizabeth's death, when it was finally safe to speak, Elizabeth had patches of blackened flesh on her face and neck that wept yellow fluid and would not heal no matter what ointments we applied. Necrosis, tissue death, large sections of her face were literally rotting off. The smell must have been horrific. Decaying flesh has a very specific odour, sweet and rotten at the same time, stomach turning. Her ladies burned incense constantly, applied perfumes, opened windows even in winter. Nothing could completely mask it. But in public, perfect, glowing, untouchable, the fairy queen, Gloriana, ageless and eternal. The portraits from her later reign tell the story if you know how to read them. They become increasingly stylized, increasingly unrealistic, increasingly divorced from actual human appearance. The rainbow portrait from around 1600 shows Elizabeth as a young woman. She was nearly 70 years old. No wrinkles, no age spots, no imperfections, perfect porcelain skin. It's not a portrait of a person. It's an icon, a symbol, a lie. Because the real Elizabeth, the woman beneath the paint and lies, was falling apart. And then there's the other torture device, the other instrument of slow destruction she wore every day, the corset. Elizabethan court fashion demanded a very specific silhouette. Tiny waist, flat chest, rigid triangular torso. The body as architecture, hard and geometric, rather than soft and curved. To achieve this, women wore corsets reinforced with whalebone, or wood, or steel, laced tight, so tight they could barely breathe, so tight their organs compressed and displaced. Elizabeth wore hers tighter than anyone. She had to. At state functions, she needed to stand for hours without showing any fatigue. The corset held her upright when her body wanted to collapse, when her legs weakened, when the pain became unbearable. It was a cage, a prison, structural support for a building that was crumbling from the inside. A properly laced Elizabethan corset reduced your waist by 4 to 6 inches. That's already severe compression. But Elizabeth's ladies reported lacing hers even tighter, 6 to 8 inches of compression every single day for 45 years. What does that do to a body? What does that level of constant pressure do to organs and bones and tissue? Your ribs bend inward. They're not designed to handle that much inward pressure for that long. Over years, they deform permanently. The rib cage changes shape, compressing inward, creating less space for your lungs and heart. Your lungs can't fully inflate. You're breathing shallow all the time, never getting quite enough air. Every breath is incomplete. You're in a constant state of mild oxygen deprivation. Your liver gets compressed, displaced, pushed out of its normal position. Over time, this causes chronic pain and dysfunction. Your liver can't process toxins properly, can't do its job effectively. Your intestines are squashed. Digestion becomes agonizing because there's nowhere for your stomach to expand. Eating is painful. Food sits heavy. You get cramps and nausea. Your spine curves under the constant pressure. Vertebrae shift. Discs compress. Chronic back pain becomes your constant companion. Standing or sitting, you're in perpetual discomfort. Lying down is the only relief, but even that's limited because your rib cage has been reshaped, your organs rearranged. Autopsy reports from other noble women of the era show the damage clearly. Cracked ribs from the pressure, indented livers with permanent grooves where the corset bones pressed, compressed lungs with reduced capacity, spinal deformities, displaced organs. Elizabeth's ladies reported that when they finally cut the corset off her corpse after she died, her torso was covered in deep grooves, permanent indentations in her flesh, where the whale bones had pressed for 45 years. The grooves were so deep you could see the outline of the corset structure imprinted in her skin like a fossil, like her body had been moulded around it. Imagine that. Imagine your clothing leaving permanent marks in your body. Imagine that level of constant pressure, constant pain for 4 decades. Never a moment of relief, except sleeping. Never a chance to just breathe fully, to let your body relax and expand and be natural. But Elizabeth couldn't stop wearing it, because without it, she'd look weak, soft, human, vulnerable, and she needed to look superhuman. She needed to project strength and control and perfection at all times. Every public appearance was an endurance test, standing in the corset for hours, breathing shallow, in pain, smiling, projecting power while dying inside. And if she showed any discomfort, any weakness, any sign of struggle, it would be in every ambassador's report by nightfall. Spain would hear about it, France would hear about it, Rome would hear about it, and they'd all start calculating how much longer England's queen would last. They'd start planning for after, start positioning themselves for the succession, start undermining her authority. So she stood and smiled, and slowly, methodically destroyed her body to preserve her power. But the 1570s and 80s brought new pressures that made everything worse, new threats that gave her even more reason to never ever show weakness. Because Mary, Queen of Scots, had arrived in England, and Mary was everything Elizabeth wasn't, everything Elizabeth could never be. May 1568, a boat crosses the Solway Firth from Scotland to England on a grey, drizzling day. On board is Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, fleeing a rebellion. Her own nobles have turned against her, accused her of murdering her husband, Lord Darnley, accused her of adultery with the Earl of Bothwell, accused her of crimes that may or may not be true, but are definitely useful to her enemies. She arrives in England seeking protection from her dear cousin Elizabeth. She writes beautiful letters about family bonds, about trust between royal women, about how surely Elizabeth will help her. Elizabeth has her arrested immediately, because Mary isn't just a refugee seeking sanctuary. She's a walking, breathing, existential threat to everything Elizabeth has built. Let's compare them because the contrast is painful. Elizabeth is 34 years old. She's been queen for 10 years, unmarried, no children, Protestant, legitimate in Protestant eyes, bastard in Catholic eyes, brilliant, calculating, paranoid, ruthless. Mary is 25 years old, beautiful in the way that gets mentioned in every account of her. She's been Queen of Scots since she was 6 days old. Recently widowed from her second husband, has a son, James, who's 2 years old, Catholic, legitimate in everyone's eyes, charming, impulsive, romantic, reckless. And according to Catholic Europe, according to the Pope and Spain and France and half of England, Mary is the rightful Queen of England. Because Elizabeth is the product of an illegal marriage. Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon was never properly annulled, which means his marriage to Anne Boleyn was never valid, which means Elizabeth is a bastard with no claim to the throne. You see the problem. Just by existing, just by being alive and Catholic and legitimate, Mary gives every Catholic in England someone to rally around. Every plot against Elizabeth has Mary at its centre. Every assassination attempt mentions putting Mary on the throne after Elizabeth is dead. And Mary has something Elizabeth doesn't, something that must have been agonising to contemplate. She's a mother. She's produced an heir. She's done the one thing queens are supposed to do, the thing everyone has been demanding Elizabeth do for a decade. Mary has a son. Elizabeth has nothing. Mary has proved her fertility. Elizabeth's fertility is a giant question mark that everyone speculates about, which must have been bitter, so bitter. But here's where it gets complicated, where it becomes more than just political. Elizabeth can't simply execute Mary. Mary is an anointed queen, crowned and consecrated by the church. Killing her would set a terrifying precedent, would establish that monarchs can be held accountable, that divine right can be challenged. It would undermine the entire foundation of monarchy itself. So Elizabeth does something arguably crueler. She keeps Mary imprisoned for 19 years. Nearly 2 decades of captivity, not in a dungeon. Mary has comfortable rooms, servants, is allowed to embroider and write letters and receive visitors. But she's a prisoner nonetheless, moved from castle to castle, always watched, always confined, never free. Every letter read by Elizabeth's spies, every visitor assessed as a potential conspirator. And during those 19 years, the plots multiply like bacteria in a warm dish, each one more elaborate than the last, each one with Mary at its centre. The Ridolfi plot in 1571, assassinate Elizabeth, marry Mary to the Duke of Norfolk, put her on the throne with Spanish support. The plan is detailed, coordinated, serious. Discovered by Elizabeth's spies, Norfolk executed. Mary spared because Elizabeth can't quite bring herself to kill another queen, can't set that precedent. The Throckmorton plot in 1583, Spanish invasion coordinated with an internal Catholic uprising. Murder Elizabeth, crown Mary, also discovered. Throckmorton tortured until he confesses everything, then executed. Mary still spared. The Babington plot in 1586, this is the one that finally seals Mary's fate. A group of young Catholic nobles plan to murder Elizabeth and free Mary. They're passionate, committed, absolutely sincere. They're also completely infiltrated by Elizabeth's spymaster, Francis Walsingham. And Walsingham does something brilliant and ruthless. He doesn't stop the plot immediately. Instead, he lets it develop. Lets the conspirators incriminate themselves. More importantly, lets them draw Mary in. Lets her incriminate herself, because Mary writes letters, approving the assassination, discussing details, giving advice. She knows what they're planning and she encourages it. Walsingham intercepts everything. He probably doctors some of it too, adds incriminating phrases, makes sure the evidence is absolutely clear. But the core is real. Mary knew about the plot. Mary approved it. Mary wanted Elizabeth dead. Finally, Elizabeth has the evidence she needs, the justification, the legal grounds. But she still hesitates for months, signs the death warrant, then changes her mind. Signs it again, can't make herself actually send it. The warrant sits on her desk while her counsellors practically tear their hair out. Every day Mary lives is another day for a Catholic uprising, another day for Spanish invasion, another day Elizabeth might be assassinated. Finally, in February of 1587, whether Elizabeth actually gives the final order or her secretary acts without full authorization is still disputed. The warrant is sent. No more delays, no more second chances. February 8th, 1587, Fotheringay Castle. A cold grey morning, Mary, Queen of Scots, is beheaded. She wears a red dress under her black gown, the colour of Catholic martyrdom. She's 44 years old. She forgives her executioner, tells him she's dying for her faith, remains composed and queenly right to the end. It takes 3 strokes of the axe. The first blow misses her neck, hits the back of her head. She makes a noise, not quite a scream, more like a groan. The second blow cuts through most of her neck, but not quite. The executioner has to saw through the last bit of tissue with the axe blade. The third stroke severs what's left. When the executioner holds up her head to show the crowd, to prove she's really dead, her lips keep moving. For several seconds after her head is separated from her body, her lips keep moving. Some say she was praying. Some say it was just nerve impulses, muscles contracting randomly. Either way, it's nightmare fuel. And when they remove her gown to prepare the body, they find her little dog, a Skye Terrier she'd been hiding under her skirts. The dog won't leave. It crawls between her severed head and body, whimpering, covered in her blood, refusing to be moved. That's the image that haunts everyone who witnessed it. That image of loyalty persisting even after death. That poor dog soaked in royal blood, trying to stay close to its mistress. News reaches Elizabeth at Greenwich Palace. She's in meetings when they tell her. Mary is dead. The execution is complete. It's done. Elizabeth falls apart completely. She locks herself in her rooms, won't eat, won't see anyone, won't speak. Her ladies report she sits for hours just staring at nothing, tears running down her face, not sobbing, just silent weeping that goes on and on. Is it guilt? Almost certainly. Mary was her cousin, her fellow queen, a woman she'd kept prisoner for 19 years before finally killing her. That weighs on a soul, or is it something else? Something deeper? Maybe it's the recognition that she's just killed the one woman in England who represented everything Elizabeth wasn't. The one woman who'd done what Elizabeth couldn't. Mary had been married 3 times, had been desired, loved, betrayed, lost everything, and she still had something Elizabeth never would: a son. James, a biological legacy. Elizabeth ruled England with absolute power, but Mary's son would inherit it, would become James the Feud, would start a new dynasty, would be remembered as Mary's son, not Elizabeth's successor. That must have been so bitter, so agonizingly bitter. But killing Mary doesn't end the threat. It doesn't bring peace, it intensifies everything, because now Philip II of Spain has the perfect excuse for war. The Catholic Queen has been martyred by the Protestant usurper. God demands vengeance. Spain must act. The Spanish Armada is coming, the largest invasion force England has ever faced. And Elizabeth is about to face her greatest test. The year everything comes to a head. The year when 45 years of survival and strategy and careful political manoeuvring all come down to one moment. The Spanish Armada, 130 ships carrying 30,000 men. The plan is straightforward, terrifying in its simplicity. Sail up the English Channel, link up with the Spanish army waiting in the Netherlands, invade England, depose Elizabeth, restore Catholicism, end the Protestant experiment once and for all. If it succeeds, Elizabeth will be executed, probably burned as a heretic. England will become a Spanish puppet state. The Protestant Reformation in England will be erased like it never happened. Elizabeth is 54 years old. in constant pain from the lead poisoning, from the corset, from what's probably undiagnosed arthritis eating away at her joints, suffering from depression after Mary's execution, barely sleeping, plagued by nightmares, barely eating because food hurts, because her stomach can't handle it, because the stress has destroyed her appetite. Her counsellors are terrified. England's navy is smaller than Spain's. The country isn't prepared for invasion. If the Armada lands troops successfully, if the Spanish army gets ashore, England will fall. And Elizabeth does something remarkable, something that cements her legend forever. She rides out to Tilbury to address her troops. She's going to stand in front of the army gathered to defend England, and she's going to make them believe they can win. This becomes one of the most famous moments in English history, one of those moments that gets taught in schools, that gets quoted endlessly, that becomes mythic. August 8th, 1588, Tilbury. Elizabeth arrives on a white horse, wearing armour. Well, a ceremonial breastplate over her dress. Not real armour, but the symbolism is powerful. She's dressed as a warrior, a queen going to war. The soldiers are nervous. They've heard about the Armada, about the massive fleet sailing toward them. They know they're outmatched, they're scared. And Elizabeth gives them the speech, the one everyone remembers. I know I have the body of a weak, feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. And of a king of England too. And I think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm. It's magnificent, powerful, perfect. She's acknowledging her female body while claiming male authority. She's admitting weakness while projecting absolute strength. She's one of them, she's saying, but also above them, anointed by God, invincible. The soldiers go wild, cheering, shouting, ready to die for her. In that moment, she transforms them from a nervous rabble into an army that believes it can defeat Spain. It's been quoted for 400 years as an example of courage and leadership and rhetorical brilliance. What they don't tell you is what happened before and after, the reality behind the legend. Before, Elizabeth was so weak from a recent illness, another flare-up of whatever chronic condition was slowly killing her, that she could barely mount her horse. Her ladies had to practically lift her into the saddle, holding her up, supporting her weight while she grabbed the pommel. They gave her wine mixed with something, possibly a stimulant, some kind of drug to keep her alert and upright during the review. Her hands were shaking. Her face was grey under the white makeup. During, she was magnificent. For 3 hours she was every inch the warrior queen. She rode along the lines, making eye contact with soldiers, sitting straight in the saddle, projecting strength and confidence, an absolute certainty of victory. It was a performance, the greatest performance of her life. Every gesture calculated, every word rehearsed, every moment designed to inspire and motivate and convince them she was invincible. And it worked. The soldiers went from nervous to fanatical. They would have followed her into hell after that speech. After, she collapsed, completely. Had to be carried from her horse to a tent. Couldn't stand, couldn't speak. The pain was so severe she was writhing, clutching her abdomen, barely conscious. She couldn't leave her chambers. For a week, the stomach pain was unbearable. Internal bleeding, her doctors whispered, though they couldn't examine her to confirm. They gave her opiates, the strongest pain relief available, and still she suffered. One of her ladies wrote in a private letter, quickly destroyed but fragments survived. Her Majesty's triumph at Tilbury has cost her dearly. She suffers greatly, though none are permitted to speak of it. I fear what this constant strain does to her body. I fear she cannot continue much longer at this pace, but she will not rest. She refuses to show weakness, even for a moment. But publicly, triumph, victory, the invincible queen. The Armada was destroyed, though less by English tactics than by weather and bad Spanish planning. Fire ships sent into the Spanish fleet caused chaos, broke up their formations, and then Atlantic storms hit. Savage weather that scattered the Spanish ships, drove them onto rocks, sank them by the dozens. The invasion never happened. Spain's great fleet limped home in pieces. England celebrated. Elizabeth became Gloriana, the immortal queen, the Protestant champion, the woman who defeated Spain through sheer force of will. And in her private rooms, she bled and suffered and put the mask back on. Because she had to. The performance could never end. But something broke in her after that. Something fundamental. She'd spent everything she had at Tilbury. Given everything to that performance. And she didn't have much left. The 1590s are when Elizabeth starts to unravel. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, but definitely falling apart. September 1588, just weeks after the Armada. Robert Dudley dies. Fever and stomach illness, probably cancer. He's 55 years old. Elizabeth had loved him for 30 years, since they were children together at court, through his scandal with Amy Robsart, through all his marriages and affairs and betrayals, through everything. He was the one constant in her life, the one person she trusted absolutely, the only man she'd ever truly loved. She locks herself in her rooms when she hears. Won't come out, won't eat, won't see anyone. Just sits in the dark, grieving. Her counsellors threaten to break down the door before she finally emerges. She's been in there for days, hasn't washed, hasn't changed clothes, hasn't eaten. She looks like a ghost. She wears his last letter in a pouch around her neck for the rest of her life, keeps every gift he'd ever given her, forbids anyone from speaking ill of him in her presence, will fly into rages if anyone mentions him disrespectfully. The grief is real, raw, visceral. The only man she'd ever loved is gone, and she's utterly alone now. She tries to fill the void with new favourites, young men, handsome, charming, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, Dudley's stepson, 20 years younger than Elizabeth. Dark-haired, intense, passionate. She adores him, gives him military commands he's not qualified for, forgives his mistakes, defends him against critics who point out he's reckless and arrogant. It's almost motherly, the way she dotes on him. Or maybe romantic, maybe both. The lines are blurred. She's 60 years old, he's in his 20s, and she's lavishing attention on him in a way that makes everyone uncomfortable. And Essex takes advantage. He's arrogant, convinced he's indispensable. When she sends him to Ireland to put down a rebellion, he fails miserably, makes an unauthorised truce with the rebels, disobeys orders, wastes resources, and then, instead of staying in Ireland to fix his mistakes, he rushes back to England without permission. He bursts into Elizabeth's private chambers early one morning, unannounced, unauthorised, doesn't wait to be admitted, just barges in while she's still in her nightgown. Elizabeth is at her dressing table. Her wig is off. Her makeup is off. For the first time in decades, someone sees Elizabeth's real face. Essex freezes. The accounts differ on exactly what he saw, but all agree he was shocked. Visibly shocked. His face went pale, his mouth fell open. He stammered an apology and backed out quickly. What did he see? The necrotic patches on her face, black and weeping. The grooves in her skin from decades of makeup corrosion. The missing teeth, the sunken cheeks without the cloth stuffing. All of the above. We don't know, but we know he was horrified. Elizabeth never forgives him for that. Not for the political failures in Ireland. Not for disobeying orders, for seeing her without the mask, for looking at her real face and recoiling. In 1601, Essex tries to stage a coup. He's convinced himself that Elizabeth's counsellors are controlling her, that she's too old to rule effectively, that England needs a change. He tries to march on the palace with armed supporters, to force her to dismiss her advisors. It's pathetic. The coup falls apart immediately. His supporters melt away. Nobody wants to actually commit treason for his ego, but it is treason, unquestionably, undeniably. Raising arms against the monarch is the definition of treason. Elizabeth signs his execution warrant. According to her ladies, she weeps while signing it. Tears running, down her face, smudging the ink. But she signs it. Essex is beheaded on February 25th, 1601. He's 34 years old, still young, still handsome, dead because he thought he was special enough to betray a queen. After his execution, Elizabeth is never the same. The depression that had always lurked in the background, that she'd fought off with will and work and constant performance, finally catches up. She stops caring about appearances as much, stops maintaining the mask quite so carefully. The white makeup gets thinner, revealing more of the damage beneath. She forgets to stuff her cheeks with cloth, so her face looks sunken, hollow. She stops eating properly. Food has become almost impossible to swallow, painful to digest. She lives on broth and wine, barely enough to survive. She stops sleeping, paces her chambers all night, walking back and forth, muttering to herself, talking to people who aren't there. Her counsellors beg her to name an heir. They've been begging for 40 years, but now it's urgent. She's 68 years old and visibly failing. She needs to name someone before she dies, or the country will descend into civil war. She refuses, absolutely refuses, won't even discuss it, maybe out of superstition. Naming an heir feels like inviting death, like admitting she's not going to last much longer, maybe out of political calculation. The second she names an heir, that person becomes the focus of every plot and scheme. Everyone starts looking toward the future instead of the present. She becomes irrelevant, a lame duck waiting to die, or maybe she just doesn't care anymore. Doesn't care who comes after her, what happens to England, whether there's a smooth succession. Maybe she's just exhausted and ready for it all to be over. The physical decay accelerates in her final years, becomes impossible to hide. By 1600 she's lost most of her teeth. The lead and the sugar she consumed compulsively, eating sweets constantly to have something pleasant in her mouth, had rotted them away. They fell out or broke off, leaving painful stumps. Her breath smells terrible, a combination of decay and infection. She stuffs her cheeks with cloth to maintain the shape of her face in public. But it makes speaking difficult, makes eating almost impossible. The cloth gets wet with saliva, gets in the way, but she can't remove it because without it her face looks cadaverous, sunken. Her hair is completely gone. The lead, the stress, the age, everything combined to destroy her hair follicles. She's bald under the wigs, completely bald, and her scalp shows signs of the lead poisoning too. Blackened patches, sores that won't heal. She wears increasingly elaborate wigs, some piled 2 feet high, decorated with jewels and pearls and gold wire, architectural marvels of false hair. They're so heavy they give her constant headaches, pressing down on her skull, but she needs them. Needs the illusion. Needs to look young and vital and queenly. Her hands shake, constantly, now. Tremors that make writing almost impossible, make holding things uncertain. Could be more lead poisoning accumulating in her nervous system. Could be early Parkinson's. Could just be the accumulated damage from 70 years of stress and survival. Whatever the cause, her hands don't work properly anymore. Her eyesight is failing. She can barely read without holding things close to her face, squinting. She needs glasses but refuses to wear them in public because they make her look old. So she pretends she can see, squinting at documents, missing details, making mistakes. And then there's the smell. Multiple sources from her final years mention it, always carefully, always euphemistically, dancing around the truth. The Queen requires much perfume in her chambers. Her Majesty's apartments must be well aired daily, windows kept open despite the cold. But one lady-in-waiting's private letter, written years after Elizabeth's death when it was finally safe to speak honestly, is more explicit. There was a corruption in Her Majesty's body that no perfume could disguise. A smell of sickness and decay that pervaded her rooms, that clung to her clothing, that followed her down corridors. We burned incense constantly, used lavender and rose water, opened every window, but it only masked the worst of it. The smell was always there, underneath, the smell of something rotting. What was causing it? A tumour growing inside her, probably uterine or ovarian cancer. An abscess from the corset's constant pressure. Infection brewing in compressed tissue. An internal infection that her immune system couldn't fight off because the lead poisoning had destroyed her body's defences. We don't know. We'll never know. But something inside Elizabeth Tudor was rotting while she still lived. Her body was dying in pieces, slowly, releasing the smell of decay while her heart still beat. And she knew it, had to know it, could smell it herself, but she couldn't acknowledge it. Couldn't seek proper medical care because that would mean admitting weakness. Couldn't stop performing because that would mean giving up. So she suffered in silence, the smell of her own decay following her through the palace, like a ghost. By late 1602, everyone can see the end coming. The courtiers, the ambassadors, her own counsellors. Elizabeth is visibly failing. Thinner every week, weaker, more confused. The famous temper is giving way to strange, quiet moods, where she'll sit for hours saying nothing, just staring at nothing. Foreign ambassadors write to their kings, prepare for transition. England's queen is dying. It will be soon now. But Elizabeth keeps performing, keeps appearing in public with her white face and red wig and elaborate gowns, keeps insisting everything is fine. She's perfectly healthy. There's nothing to worry about. Keeps lying until she can't anymore. January 1603. Elizabeth is 69 years old. She's been queen for 44 years. She's exhausted. Every cell in her body is exhausted. And she finally stops wearing the makeup. Just stops. One morning, she tells her ladies, no more ceruse, no more layers of poison. She's done. Her ladies are horrified. Without the makeup, everyone will see what's underneath. Everyone will see the damage, the blackened patches, the necrosis, the truth. I am past caring what they see, she reportedly tells one lady. Her voice is flat, drained of emotion. Let them look. Let them see what they've made me. She stops eating. Not from choice. Swallowing has become agony. Her throat is swollen, damaged from the lead and infection. Her stomach can't tolerate food anymore. Everything hurts. She manages sips of broth, some wine, that's all. Her ladies try to coax her to eat, bringing her favourite foods, tempting her with delicacies. She waves them away. Can't, won't. It hurts too much. Her abdomen swells grotesquely over the next few weeks. She looks 6 months pregnant, her belly distended and hard. It's probably fluid accumulation from organ failure. Her liver and kidneys are shutting down. Can't process waste anymore. So fluid backs up into her body cavity. But the symbolism is devastating, cruel in its irony. After a lifetime of virginity, of refusing marriage and children, of never producing an heir, her body mocks her with the appearance of pregnancy. This is what you never had, it seems to say. This is what you sacrificed for power. And it's just fluid and dying organs and failure. She refuses to go to bed. This becomes the defining feature of her final weeks. Her doctors beg her. Her counsellors plead with her. Her ladies try everything they can think of to persuade her. She absolutely refuses. Won't do it, won't lie down. She sits in chairs propped up with cushions, leans against piles of cushions on the floor when sitting upright becomes too painful. Her ladies take turns holding her up, supporting her weight, keeping her from falling over. Days pass, then a week, 2 weeks, 17 days total without lying down. She barely speaks. When she does, it's fragments of sentences that don't quite make sense. Names of people long dead. Half-remembered prayers in Latin. The words running together. Sometimes she laughs suddenly for no apparent reason. That high, strange laugh that makes everyone uncomfortable. Sometimes she stares at corners of the room and asks, who's there? When nobody is. Sees things that aren't there. Talks to shadows. Her ladies whisper that the queen has gone mad. That the demons have finally come for her. That she's seeing the ghosts of everyone she's killed or let die. Why won't she lie down? they ask her over and over. Once I lie in that bed, I shall never rise again. That's what she says when she's lucid enough to answer. She's not wrong. The bed is a trap. Death waits there. Another time, once she says, if I lie down, I surrender. And I have never surrendered. Not to my father, not to my sister, not to Spain, not to time itself. I will not surrender now. Some historians think it was psychological, that lying down meant accepting death, and Elizabeth had spent 70 years refusing to accept anything she didn't want. That sitting upright was her last act of defiance, her final way of staying in control. Others suggest it was medical. Perhaps lying flat put unbearable pressure on her damaged organs. Perhaps the fluid in her abdomen made breathing impossible when horizontal. Perhaps the pain was simply too severe. Or perhaps she was just delirious. The lead poisoning, the organ failure, the starvation, everything combining to destroy her mind. Her brain slowly shutting down. Maybe there was no rational reason. Maybe she was just confused and terrified and holding on to the last shred of control she had. Staying upright, refusing to lie down, refusing to surrender even to her own dying body. Her counsellors, meanwhile, are in full panic mode. She hasn't named an heir. She's dying, obviously dying. And if she goes without designating a successor, England will explode. Catholics and Protestants will go to war over the throne. Foreign powers will invade during the chaos. Everything will collapse. They bring her name after name, plead with her to just nod, just make some gesture indicating who should succeed her. James VI of Scotland, Mary Stuart's son, Protestant, the logical choice. He has royal blood, he's already ruling Scotland successfully. He's the obvious heir. She won't respond, just stares at them or through them. Arabella Stuart, another cousin, also Protestant, nothing. No reaction. Various English nobles who have some claim to the throne through complicated genealogy. Silence. Finally, on March 23rd, after days of pleading, they get her to make some gesture toward James. The accounts differ on whether she actually spoke his name or just nodded weakly when they suggested him. But it's enough. Barely enough. The succession is secured. England has an heir. That night, she finally consents to bed. Or rather, she collapses and can't fight anymore. Can't hold herself upright any longer. Her body just gives out. They carry her to the royal bed, 4 ladies supporting her weight. Lay her gently on pillows, try to make her comfortable, though they know it's hopeless. Her breathing is laboured, irregular. She takes a breath, then nothing for long seconds, then another gasping breath. The death rattle, they call it. The sound of a body shutting down. Her eyes are open, but unfocused. Looking at something they can't see, maybe seeing the ghosts finally, all the people she's killed or let die. Her mother on the scaffold. Catherine Howard's terror, Mary Stuart's severed head, Robert Dudley's last letter. She can't speak anymore, can't respond. Just lies there, breathing those irregular gasps, staring at nothing. Her archbishop kneels beside the bed and prays, commending her soul to God, asking for mercy for all her sins, praying she'll be received into paradise despite everything. Her ladies hold her hands, weeping. They've served her for decades, some of them. They've watched her perform and suffer and slowly destroy herself for England. Her counsellors stand in the corners, already planning, already composing messages to send to James in Scotland, already thinking about the transition, about how to maintain order, about their own positions in the new regime. She lasts through the night. As dawn approaches on March 24th, 1603, her breathing becomes shallower, slower, each breath more laboured than the last. And then she stops, just stops breathing. No dramatic last words, no deathbed confession, no final gesture. Elizabeth Tudor dies as quietly as she'd lived loudly, slipping away in the grey dawn light. And then the cover-up begins, immediately. Before her body has time to cool, the doors are locked. Heavy bars drop into place, Guards are posted with orders to let no one in or out without explicit authorization. Only the most trusted ladies are allowed to remain. Women who've served Elizabeth for decades, women who know how to keep secrets. The counsellors give explicit orders, their voices low and urgent. Speak of nothing you see here. Nothing. Your lives and your family's lives depend on your silence. Do you understand? The ladies nod. They understand. In Tudor England, you learn quickly that some things cannot be spoken. When they begin to undress her body, to prepare it for burial, the horror emerges layer by layer. The elaborate gown comes off first. Red velvet and gold thread and pearls sewn into the fabric. It takes 3 ladies to lift it because it's so heavy, so encrusted with jewels and wire and elaborate decoration. Underneath is another gown. They peel away the layers one by one, like unwrapping a grotesque gift. The corset is next. They have to cut through the laces because they've been pulled so tight, tied so many times in the same knots, that they can't be undone normally. The laces have practically fused together with dried sweat and time. When they finally cut through and remove the corset, the damage is immediately visible, shocking even to women who've helped to dress her for years and knew it was bad. Deep grooves in her torso, permanent indentations where the whalebone had pressed for 45 years. Not shallow marks that will fade, deep channels carved into her flesh like riverbeds, some of them a half-inch deep. You can see the outline of the corset structure imprinted in her skin. Every bone, every stay, every reinforcement creating its own groove. Her body has been moulded around the corset, shaped by it, permanently deformed. Her ribs are visible, bent inward at unnatural angles. Some are cracked, broken from the decades of pressure. Her rib cage is no longer a proper cage, it's collapsed inward, compressed. Her skin is discoloured everywhere the corset touched, mottled purple and yellow and black in places. In some spots, the flesh has broken down completely from constant compression. Open. Sores that never healed because the corset never came off long enough for them to heal. One lady vomits into a bowl, has to turn away, hand over her mouth, gagging. She's seen death before, prepared bodies before, but this is different. This is torture memorialised in flesh. The chemise comes off next, the final layer of clothing. And now they have to deal with the makeup. The white ceruse is still on her face, cracking and flaking. They use oils and soft cloths to remove it. They try to be gentle with the corpse, but the makeup doesn't come off easily. It's been soaking into her skin for so long, layered on so thick, that removing it is like peeling off a mask. And it does come off in sheets, large pieces of makeup taking skin with it. Because the lead has destroyed the structural integrity of her skin, broken down the proteins that hold skin cells together. So when they wipe away the makeup, layers of skin come too. What lies beneath isn't the face of an old woman. It's not even the face of a very sick old woman. It's something worse, something that makes the ladies gasp and cross themselves. Large patches of completely black, necrotic tissue, dead flesh that's been rotting for years while she lived. Her cheeks, her forehead, the sides of her nose, all showing extensive necrosis. Ulcerated areas weeping fluid even after death. The body still trying to expel infection that will never be resolved now. In some places, the flesh has eroded down to bone. You can see the edges of her cheekbones, the curve of her jaw, not because the skin is thin, but because it's gone entirely, eaten away by decades of lead poisoning. One lady later describes it in a letter, years afterward, when she's dying and doesn't care about the consequences of speaking, as if Her Majesty's face had been consumed from within by some terrible corruption. The lead had eaten through her flesh like acid. I have seen many corpses, but never anything so terrible as the Queen's face beneath that white mask she wore for so long. They wrap her head quickly, covering the horror. No one should see this. No one can see this. The legend cannot be destroyed by the reality. And then they remove the final layers, the undergarments, and they see what doctors have been forbidden to examine for decades. The abdomen is hugely distended, hard. They can see the outline of a mass underneath the skin. Tumour, probably, large enough to cause the swelling, the pain, the symptoms that plagued her for years. But between her legs, the accounts are fragmentary here, deliberately vague, because the women who saw it were too shocked to describe it clearly, even years later. One servant writes only, "Wrong, it was wrong, not as it should be." Another says, "Either absent or malformed, I cannot say which in my shock." A third, more detailed, "Not as other women are made. The entrance closed or absent, I could not tell. The whole area scarred and strange. I do not know if this was from injury or birth, but it was not natural, not normal." What did they see? Androgen insensitivity syndrome creating abnormal anatomy? Surgical scarring from some secret operation? A birth defect she'd hidden her entire life? Some other intersex variation? We'll never know, because nobody was allowed to investigate further. The head lady in waiting makes a decision in that moment. They wrap the body immediately, layer after layer of cloth binding Elizabeth's secrets in linen and silk. They call for the lead coffin. It arrives within hours, already prepared because they knew this was coming. They place Elizabeth's wrapped body inside and seal it immediately. Molten lead poured into the seams, creating an airtight seal. The coffin is closed before rigor mortis fully sets, before anyone else can see, before questions can be asked, and then the ladies are dealt with. The ones who prepared the body, who saw too much, they're sent to different estates across England within days, separated, given generous payments and stern warnings. Some get titles, some get land, all get very clear orders. Speak of nothing you saw, nothing. Your silence is bought and paid for. Over the next year, 3 of them die. Different causes, different locations, but all sudden and convenient. One falls downstairs, one gets a fever and dies within days. One simply stops breathing in her sleep. Natural causes, they say, nothing suspicious. The doctors who attended Elizabeth in her final weeks fare no better. Dr. Roger within 6 months, Dr. Brown within a year, Dr. Atkins 18 months later. All sudden, all unexplained, all very convenient for keeping secrets buried. The official story is simple. The Queen died peacefully in her bed, surrounded by loved ones, having lived a long and glorious life. Her body has been prepared with all appropriate dignity and respect. She will be buried with full honours befitting England's greatest monarch. The funeral is spectacular, pure propaganda, theatre on a national scale. They create an effigy of Elizabeth, a wax figure made to look like her at her prime. Maybe 30 years old, beautiful, perfect, dressed in royal robes, wearing the crown, looking serene and queenly. This effigy lies on top of the coffin during the funeral procession, because this is what people need to see. Not the rotting corpse inside the lead box, but the eternal Queen, forever young, forever perfect. Thousands line the streets of London to watch the procession. They weep for good Queen Bess, the Virgin Queen, Gloriana, the woman who saved England from Spain, who brought prosperity and culture and a golden age. They have no idea what's actually in that coffin, no idea what the makeup was hiding, no idea what secrets are being buried along with her bones. The procession moves slowly through London, taking hours. Every bell in every church tolls. The sound is deafening, overwhelming, a symphony of mourning that echoes across the city. They bury her in Westminster Abbey, the Lady Chapel. A magnificent monument is erected with her effigy lying in state, eternal and unchanging. It's beautiful, dignified, perfect. The real body, the evidence, is locked away in lead 20 feet below, and James I, Mary Stuart's son, takes the throne. The person Elizabeth spent her entire reign trying to keep away from power. The son of the woman she executed, the heir she never wanted but had no choice but to accept. James is 47 years old when he becomes King of England. He's been King of Scotland since he was 13 months old, so he knows how to rule. And the first thing he does, before he's even properly crowned, before the transition is complete, is issue very specific orders about his predecessor. Elizabeth's tomb is not to be disturbed, ever, under any circumstances. New rules are written into the Abbey's charter. The Queen's resting place is sacred, inviolable, no exceptions. Guards are posted, not obvious ones, not soldiers standing watch, but Abbey officials are told to report any attempts to access the tomb, any unusual interest, any questions that go too far. Why? What is James afraid of? He never met Elizabeth in person, only knew her through letters and ambassadors and political manoeuvring. But he knows enough. He knows there were secrets. He knows the official story doesn't match the whispered rumours. He knows that whatever is in that coffin could threaten the legitimacy of his own rule. Because if Elizabeth wasn't really a woman in the biological sense, if she was intersex or had some condition that made her not fit the categories everyone understood, then what does that say about female monarchy? What does that say about the legitimacy of her entire reign? What does that say about the laws and precedents she set? Better to keep it buried, better to maintain the legend, better to let the Virgin Queen remain mysterious and perfect and untouchable. And so the tomb stays sealed, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. Other monarchs are studied, other tombs are opened. Archaeological techniques improve, become sophisticated enough to learn incredible things from bones and tissue and DNA. But not Elizabeth, never Elizabeth. The pattern is consistent, suspicious, deliberate. 1810, they open Henry VII's tomb in Westminster Abbey to make repairs to the chapel. While they're there, they examine his remains, take measurements, make observations, right next to Elizabeth's tomb, but hers stays sealed. 1869, restoration work in the Abbey requires accessing several royal tombs. They open tombs, move coffins, examine remains to ensure they're being properly preserved. Elizabeth's tomb is surrounded by this work, but remains untouched. 1932, more restoration, more tombs opened, not Elizabeth's. 1952, Elizabeth II is about to be crowned. There's a movement among historians, a genuine groundswell of academic interest. Let's finally examine Elizabeth II, they say. Modern forensic techniques could answer so many questions. We could understand her health issues, confirm or deny the intersex theories, learn about Tudor medicine and diseases. They submit formal petitions to the Crown, to the Church of England, to Westminster Abbey. Multiple universities backing the request, famous historians adding their names. The timing is perfect, they argue. One Elizabeth about to be crowned, let's honour the first by finally understanding her fully. The answer comes back quickly, firmly. No. Out of respect for the dead, the tomb will not be disturbed, but they're disturbing other tombs during the same restoration work, opening them, studying them, carefully examining remains, just not Elizabeth's. 1975, ground-penetrating radar becomes available, new technology that can see through solid objects, create images of what's inside without touching anything. Completely non-invasive. You don't have to open the tomb, don't have to disturb anything. Just scan it from the outside. Historians get excited. This is perfect. This solves the respect problem. You're not disturbing the dead, just looking from a distance. They petition again. Different technology, different era, but same request. Please let us finally understand what's in Elizabeth's tomb. Denied. The technology's too new, they're told. Too untested. We can't risk it. But they're using the same technology on ancient Egyptian tombs, on archaeological sites around the world. It's not too new or untested. It's just not allowed for Elizabeth. 1984, DNA testing becomes scientifically viable. Revolutionary technique that can tell you everything about a person from tiny samples. You could take a microscopic sample from the coffin seal, from any residue, and learn incredible things. Wouldn't even need to open the tomb. Academic papers are written proposing this. Conferences held discussing what we could learn. The historical importance can't be overstated, they argue. We could finally answer the intersex question. Could understand Tudor genetics. Could confirm royal lineages. Could learn about diseases and health in the 16th century. Denied. Privacy concerns, they're told. Though the person in question has been dead for 380 years and privacy usually expires after a century at most. 2003, the 400th anniversary of Elizabeth's death. Perfect timing for finally examining her remains. Major international interest. Multiple universities across several countries submit a joint petition. The technology is now incredibly advanced. They can scan, DNA test, reconstruct her face, understand her health issues, all without significantly disturbing the remains. The historical value is immense, they argue. The public interest is huge. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to honour Elizabeth by understanding her fully, by learning the truth about her life and health and struggles. Denied. It would set a dangerous precedent, the official response says. If we allow this, everyone will want to examine royal remains. But they already do. Examine royal remains. That's the precedent. What they mean is, this particular royal cannot be examined. 2012, Richard III is found under a parking lot in Leicester. His skeleton is exhumed with huge public fanfare. Universities fight over who gets to study him. He's CT scanned, DNA tested, examined by dozens of specialists. They learn everything about him. His scoliosis, his diet, his injuries, how he died, what diseases he had. The results are published in major scientific journals. There's a huge media circus. Documentaries are made, books are written. Everyone agrees this is fantastic. This is how archaeology should be done. This is respect for history. And historians point out, if you can do this for Richard III, why not Elizabeth Warshend? She's far more historically significant. We'd learn far more. The justification is identical. No response. The question is ignored. Requests continue to be denied without explanation. 2018. Modern DNA techniques can now extract information from almost nothing. A fragment of bone, a strand of hair, microscopic samples. Several geneticists and historians submit a very specific, limited request. Just let us take a tiny sample from the coffin seal, not even opening it, just scraping a bit of residue from the lead seam. Completely non-invasive, specifically to test for intersex conditions, to finally answer the question that's lingered for 400 years. Was Elizabeth I genetically XY? Was the Virgin Queen biologically unable to have children? This isn't idle curiosity, they argue. This matters for understanding how we view female monarchs, how we understand gender and power, how we teach history. If Elizabeth was intersex and successfully ruled for 45 years, that's an incredible story of overcoming adversity. It should be told. She should be honoured for it. Denied. No explanation given. Request is simply refused. 2023, 420 years after her death. The technology is now so advanced, you could practically reconstruct her entire genome from microscopic samples. Could answer every medical question. Could understand everything about her health, her ancestry, her secrets. Historians try again. The answer is still no. Why? After 420 years, why is Elizabeth still different? Why does her tomb remain the one place in Westminster Abbey that cannot be examined, cannot be studied, cannot be understood? The answer is uncomfortable but obvious, because whatever is in that coffin destroys the myth, and the myth is too valuable to risk. The story of Elizabeth I props up centuries of British monarchy. It justifies female rulers in a way no other story does. It creates a template for what a queen should be: strong, independent, devoted to duty above all else, choosing country over personal happiness. That story has been told and retold for 400 years. It's in every history book, every biography, every documentary. The Virgin Queen who sacrificed everything for England, who ruled alone and magnificently, who was pure and powerful and perfect. But what if the truth is messier? What if she wasn't a virgin by choice? What if her body made that choice for her, made it impossible for her to marry anyone without the truth being discovered? What if the entire reign was built on hiding a medical condition that would have been seen as monstrous in the 1500s? What if she was intersex, genetically male but appearing female, and every day was a tightrope walk of keeping that secret? What if the white makeup wasn't vanity but necessity, covering the damage from slowly poisoning herself because she had no choice? What if the refusal to marry wasn't noble sacrifice but desperate self-preservation? What if the Virgin Queen was in fact hiding in plain sight, performing womanhood, performing queenship, performing perfection, while her body betrayed her in ways she couldn't control? Those questions are dangerous. They require re-examining everything we think we know about the Tudor era, about Elizabeth, about female power and gender, and what it means to rule. They require admitting that maybe the greatest queen in English history succeeded despite, or perhaps because of, being biologically different in ways that would have gotten her killed if discovered. They require uncomfortable conversations about how we create legends that serve power rather than truth, about how we sanitize history to make it easier to digest, about how we bury evidence that doesn't fit our preferred narratives, so the tomb stays sealed, the body stays buried, the legend lives on, untouched by inconvenient facts. But here's what we know for certain, what no amount of tomb sealing can hide. Elizabeth Tudor lived in constant, agonizing pain. She poisoned herself daily with lead and arsenic for 45 years. She compressed her organs with whalebone corsets that permanently deformed her body. She performed perfection while rotting from the inside out. She refused to marry, and whatever the reason, biological or political or personal, that choice defined her entire existence. Every day, every decision, every policy was shaped by the fact that she ruled alone in a world designed for men. She couldn't have children, or chose not to, or was physically unable to. The pressure to produce an heir never stopped, and yet she never did. The Virgin Queen died without issue, leaving the throne to the son of the woman she executed. She died slowly, horribly, refusing to surrender even to her own failing body. 17 days sitting upright because lying down meant accepting death, and she'd never accepted anything she didn't choose. And when they finally undressed her corpse, what they found was horrifying enough to trigger an immediate cover-up that has now lasted 420 years. 4 centuries of sealed tombs and refused requests and careful myth-making. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal. Some lies are too useful to abandon. Some bodies must stay buried so that empires can survive. So what do we do with Elizabeth? How do we understand her now, 420 years later, with all the evidence scattered and contradictory and deliberately obscured? Here's what I think. We honour her by acknowledging the full truth, as much as we can know it, not the sanitized legend, not the perfect icon, but the complicated, suffering, brilliant, ruthless, damaged human being who somehow survived and thrived in impossible circumstances. Elizabeth was extraordinary. That's not in question. Under her rule, England went from a second-rate power to a global force. She navigated religious wars without the catastrophic violence that consumed Europe. She held off Spain when everyone thought she'd fail. She presided over a cultural renaissance that gave us Shakespeare and Marlowe and the foundations of modern English literature. She was a political genius, a skilled diplomat, a master manipulator who played Europe's powerful men against each other for 45 years and won almost every time. That's the victory. That's what history remembers. But the cost? The hidden cost we're only now beginning to understand. A woman who couldn't show her real face, who poisoned herself to maintain an image, who crushed her body to project strength, who may have been intersex and had to hide it every moment of every day, who couldn't have children but had to pretend it was a choice, who loved but could never fully have the relationship she wanted, who died slowly, painfully, and then had the evidence buried to preserve the myth. She was brilliant and ruthless and strategic and deeply, profoundly damaged by the world she lived in. She survived by performing strength while dying inside. She ruled magnificently while being slowly destroyed by the very things that made her look powerful. She was a woman in a world designed to destroy women. And she won, but the victory cost her everything that made her human. The lead makeup that ate through her face, the whalebone corset that crushed her organs, the endless performance that never stopped even for a moment. The secrets buried so deep that 400 years later, we still can't look at them. That's the legacy, not just of Elizabeth, but of every woman who's had to destroy herself to be taken seriously, who's had to hide who they really are to survive, who's had to poison themselves, literally or metaphorically, to meet impossible standards. Elizabeth did it with lead and lies, with corsets and cosmetics, with strategic marriages that never happened and children that were never born, with a lifetime of performing perfection while rotting underneath. We do it differently now. The tools have changed, but the principle remains the same. Hide the weakness, perform perfection, survive at any cost, and when you die, make sure they bury the evidence. Because here's the thing about Elizabeth that we don't like to admit. She wasn't strong because she was superhuman. She was strong because she had no choice. Weakness meant death. Vulnerability meant execution. Being human meant losing everything. So she became something else, something harder, something that could withstand the pressure and the poison and the pain, something that could rule without love, without children, without showing a single crack in the armor. And it worked. She died in her bed, not on a scaffold. She ruled for 45 years, not 45 days. She's remembered as great, not weak. The strategy succeeded. But at what cost? What did she lose by never being allowed to be human? What did England lose by demanding she be perfect instead of real? We'll never know. Because the tomb stays sealed, the body stays buried, the secrets stay hidden. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Elizabeth's final act of defiance is keeping her secrets even in death. Maybe she knew they'd try to examine her, try to understand her, try to turn her into a cautionary tale, or a medical curiosity, or a historical puzzle to be solved. So she made sure they buried her in lead, made sure the coffin was sealed, made sure her ladies kept their mouths shut, made sure that even after death, she controlled her own narrative. The Virgin Queen, they call her, pure and powerful and perfect, forever mysterious, forever untouchable, forever ruling from her grave. And maybe that's exactly what she wanted. To be remembered as legend rather than human. To keep her secrets even after death. To maintain control, even when control should be impossible. If that's true, if that's what she chose, then she's still winning. Still performing, still refusing to surrender, even to history itself. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, I want you to think about Elizabeth. Not the woman in the portraits with the white face and the jewels, not the Virgin Queen of legend, but the person underneath all those layers. Think about her waking up every morning in pain and putting on the mask anyway, looking in the mirror and seeing her face rotting and covering it with poison, feeling her body failing and lacing the corset tighter. Think about her standing in front of armies and giving speeches about having the heart of a king, then collapsing in private and bleeding. About her loving someone deeply and knowing she could never have them. About her ruling with absolute power and paying for it with everything that makes life worth living. Think about what they found when they undressed her corpse. The grooves in her skin deep enough to see bone, the blackened flesh where the makeup had eaten through, the mysteries between her legs that nobody will talk about, the secrets that were wrapped in lead and buried in darkness. Think about why, 420 years later, we still can't look. Why every request is denied. Why her tomb remains the one place in Westminster Abbey that's forbidden territory. What are we still afraid to see? What truths are we still burying? What lies are we still telling ourselves? Because the body in Westminster Abbey isn't just Elizabeth's, it's every secret we've ever been too afraid to examine. Every woman who's been turned into a myth instead of remembered as a human. Every truth that's been sealed in lead because the legend was more valuable. Elizabeth Tudor is still winning, still performing, still keeping her secrets, still controlling the narrative, even from beyond the grave. The Virgin Queen, they call her, pure and powerful and perfect, forever. But if you listen closely, late at night, when the Abbey is empty and London is quiet, you can almost hear something. Not her voice exactly, but something like laughter, quiet, knowing, triumphant, because she knows something we don't. She knows what's in that coffin. She knows what they found when they undressed her. She knows why they sealed her away so quickly, why they scattered her ladies, why they killed her doctors. She knows the truth, and she knows we'll never have the courage to look. The dead keep secrets better than the living. That's what they say. And Elizabeth Tudor kept more secrets than anyone. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried. Some legends are worth more than truth. Some queens rule forever, not despite the lies, but because of them. And somewhere, deep beneath Westminster Abbey, wrapped in lead and linen and centuries of careful myth-making, Elizabeth waits. The Virgin Queen, Gloriana, the woman who sacrificed everything for England, or the woman who had no choice but to perform perfection until it killed her. The woman who was different in ways that would have destroyed her if discovered. The woman who turned necessity into legend and suffering into power. We'll never know which story is true, because the tomb stays sealed, the body stays buried, the legend lives on. And maybe that's exactly how she wanted it. One final performance that never ends. One final secret that never gets revealed. One final act of control in a life defined by having to control everything. Sweet dreams, everyone. Sleep well, or try to, because now you know what's under Westminster Abbey. You know what they're hiding. You know why they'll never let anyone look, and you can never unknow it. The Virgin Queen is still watching, still keeping her secrets, still ruling from the darkness. And somewhere in the lead-lined tomb, if you could hear through all that metal and time and deliberate silence, you might hear something that sounds almost like laughter. She won. She survived. She died in her bed instead of on a scaffold. She's remembered as great instead of weak. She controlled her own story even after death. And the rest of us are still trying to understand how she did it. Still trying to see through the makeup and the lies and the carefully constructed legend. Still wondering what's really in that tomb, but we'll never know, because some secrets are buried too deep. Some truths are locked too tight. Some queens refuse to surrender, even to history itself. Thank you for listening tonight, for staying with me through this journey into the shadows of Tudor England, into the dark corners of Elizabeth's life that history tried to seal away. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person I make these videos for. Someone who isn't satisfied with the sanitized version. Someone who wants to understand the human cost of history. Someone who knows that the most interesting stories are the ones they try to bury. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more stories like this coming. More secrets that have been locked away for centuries. More truths that are stranger and darker than any fiction. Drop a comment and let me know. What historical mystery should we unravel next? What other secrets are buried in lead, waiting for someone brave enough to ask questions? Until next time, sleep well. Dream of queens and power and the price we pay for legend. And remember, the dead keep secrets better than the living. But sometimes, if you listen carefully enough, those secrets whisper their way through the centuries anyway. Westminster Abbey stands in London tonight, as it has for nearly 1,000 years, and deep beneath it, wrapped in lead, lies Elizabeth Tudor, the Virgin Queen, the greatest monarch England ever had, or the greatest performance anyone ever gave, the longest lie ever told, the most expensive secret ever kept. We'll never know which, and maybe that's the point. Maybe the not knowing is the final victory. Maybe the mystery is the power. The tomb stays sealed, the legend lives on, and Elizabeth wins again. Good night, everyone. Sleep tight. And don't think too hard about what's buried beneath the places we call sacred. Some stones are better left unturned, some tombs are better left sealed, some queens are better left mysterious. Elizabeth knew that. She made sure of it. And 420 years later, she's still controlling the narrative from her lead-lined grave. The Virgin Queen. Forever perfect, forever powerful, forever untouchable, forever unknowable, exactly as she planned.